I stood frozen in my own hallway, phone pressed against my ear, listening to my boss tell me the presentation was canceled. My heart was racing, but not from disappointment. It was the relief flooding through me, the permission to trust what my gut had been screaming for the past 48 hours. Something was wrong with Emma. I didn't bother responding to my boss. I just ended the call and stood there in the San Francisco hotel lobby, my roller bag still beside me, my mind replaying that video call from last night. Emma's face, the swelling around her left eye. My mother-in-law Carol's too bright smile as she explained it away. She bumped into the coffee table, Sarah. You know how toddlers are. But I knew my daughter. I knew every expression, every cry, every look in her eyes. And last night, when Emma saw me on that screen, she didn't look like a clumsy 2-year-old who'd had an accident. She looked scared. I was already walking toward the exit, already pulling up the rideshare app. The flight home would take 2 hours. I could be back in Seattle by dinner time. Jake wasn't answering his phone, which wasn't unusual since he had back-to-back meetings on Thursdays, but Carol should have answered. I'd called her 3 times this morning. Nothing. The backup nanny cam footage. I pulled it up on my phone as the car merged onto the highway toward the airport. The app showed no recent activity. That was impossible. I'd installed 2 cameras in the living room before I left, one obvious and one hidden behind the bookshelf that Carol didn't know about. Both were motion activated. There should have been hours of footage. Unless someone had found them and deleted everything, my hands were shaking as I booked the earliest flight. I texted Lisa, my coworker and closest friend at the firm. Emergency. Flying home. Cover for me? Her response was immediate. Done. Everything okay? I don't know yet. 3 days ago, this trip had seemed like a dream opportunity. The senior partners wanted me to lead the pitch for our biggest potential client, a tech startup worth millions. It was the kind of assignment that could make my career, the validation I'd worked 12 years for. And when Carol had volunteered, practically insisted on watching Emma, it had seemed perfect. Sarah, sweetheart, you go do what you need to do, she'd said, sitting in my living room with her hands folded in her lap like a picture of grandmotherly virtue. Emma and I will have a wonderful time together. It's about time I got to know my granddaughter better. That should have been my first warning. Carol lived 20 minutes away and had barely visited in the 2 years since Emma was born. She'd always had excuses. Too busy with her garden club, her book group, her volunteer work. Jake made excuses for her, said she was still adjusting to being a grandmother, still grieving his father who'd passed 5 years ago. But I'd seen the way she looked at me at family dinners, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she asked about my job, the subtle comments about working mothers, about daycare, about whether Emma was getting enough attention at home. You know, Sarah, children need their mothers, especially at this age. I'd ignored it, smiled through it. Jake loved his mother, and I loved Jake, so I tried to see past her passive aggression to the lonely widow underneath. That was my mistake. The plane couldn't fly fast enough. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a call back from Carol or Jake. Nothing. I pulled up the cloud storage for the hidden camera, the backup I'd set up specifically because I didn't fully trust technology. And there it was. The footage was there, automatically uploaded every hour. My stomach dropped as I scrolled back to this morning, 6 a.m. Carol entering the living room, looking directly at the bookshelf camera. She knew. She walked right up to it, smiled, and covered the lens with tape. 7 a.m. The tape was removed. Carol was on her phone, pacing. I couldn't hear the audio through the airplane Wi-Fi, but I could see her mouth moving, her free hand gesturing emphatically. 8 a.m. Another woman entered the frame. Older, well-dressed, someone I didn't recognize. They were talking, and then they started going through my things. The desk drawers, the bookshelf. The woman was taking photos of our family pictures, our mail, documents I'd left on the counter. 9 a.m. They were in my bedroom. I could see the edge of the doorframe, but the camera angle didn't reach that far. But I could see them carrying things. My jewelry box, the folder where I kept important documents, Emma's baby book. Where was Emma? I scrolled faster, my heart pounding. There, 10 a.m. Carol carrying Emma into frame. My baby girl was crying, reaching for something off camera. Carol set her down roughly on the couch, and Emma immediately tried to get up. Carol pushed her back down. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make Emma cry harder. The other woman said something. Carol laughed. I couldn't watch anymore. I closed the app and focused on breathing, on not screaming in the middle of this airplane full of strangers. I had evidence. I had proof. But of what, exactly? Theft? Child endangerment? I needed to get home. I needed to see Emma with my own eyes. The moment we landed, I was running through the terminal. The rideshare driver must have sensed my panic because he didn't try to make small talk, just drove 15 miles over the speed limit and got me to my house in 23 minutes. I used my key instead of ringing the doorbell. The house was quiet, too quiet. I could hear voices from the back bedroom, muffled but intense. I left my bag by the door and moved silently down the hallway, my phone already recording video. The bedroom door was cracked open. Through it, I could see Carol and the other woman going through my jewelry drawer, sorting items into 2 piles on the bed. My grandmother's pearls, the diamond earrings Jake had given me for our anniversary, the antique brooch my mother had left me. She won't even notice most of this is gone, the other woman was saying. Her voice was crisp, educated, with a hint of satisfaction. You said she's always working, never pays attention to the details. That's the problem, Betty, Carol replied. She's never here, always running off to some meeting, some conference, some trip. That child spends more time with strangers than with her own mother. Well, after tomorrow, that won't be your problem anymore. The lawyer said the filing will be processed by Monday. Once the judge sees the evidence of neglect, of the unsafe environment, they'll grant emergency custody. Emma will be with me, where she belongs. My blood turned to ice. Custody filing. Evidence of neglect. This wasn't just theft. This was a setup. I stepped into the doorway. Evidence of what, exactly? Both women spun around. Carol's face went through a remarkable transformation, from shock to panic to fury, in less than 3 seconds. Betty, whoever she was, just looked annoyed at being interrupted. Sarah. Carol's hand went to her chest, a theatrical gesture of surprise. What are you doing here? I thought you were in San Francisco until Friday. Presentation got canceled. Funny how things work out. I held up my phone, making sure they could see the recording light. Want to explain why you're going through my jewelry? Or maybe why you're talking about filing for custody of my daughter? That's not, you don't understand, Carol started, but Betty cut her off with a sharp look. This is a private conversation, Betty said coldly. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Leave? This is my house. Actually, according to the police report we filed this morning, this house is an unsafe environment for a child. We're here documenting evidence for the court. What police report? Betty smiled. It wasn't a nice smile, the one reporting suspected child abuse. The bruises on Emma's face, the lack of proper supervision, the dangerous conditions. Someone had to speak up for that poor child. The rage that went through me was white-hot and crystallizing. Everything clicked into place. The bruises, the deleted camera footage, Carol's sudden interest in babysitting. This had been planned. Where is Emma? She's napping, Carol said quickly. She's fine. She's perfectly safe. I want to see her. Now, Sarah, you're being hysterical. This is exactly the kind of behavior that concerns us. You're unstable, you're aggressive, you prioritize your career over your child. I'm calling the police. I was already dialing. You can explain to them why you're stealing from my house and why you filed a false report. It's not false! Carol's voice rose, cracking. Look at her! Look at those bruises. That happened on your watch, in your home, because you're never here to protect her. Those bruises happened yesterday. While she was with you. That's a lie. Is it? Because I have footage from the nanny cam you didn't know about. The one that shows you pushing Emma onto the couch this morning. The one that shows you and your friend here going through my belongings. The one that's been uploading to the cloud every hour since Monday. The color drained from Carol's face. Betty took a step back, and I saw her hand moving toward her purse. 911. What's your emergency? I need to report a break-in and attempted theft. 2 women are in my home without permission, going through my belongings. One of them has filed a false police report. I have a minor child in the house and I'm concerned for her safety. The operator's voice was calm, professional. "Are you in danger right now, ma'am?" "I don't think so, but I'd like officers here as soon as possible. Units are being dispatched to your location. Can you stay on the line?" "Yes." Carol was crying now, actual tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. I'm trying to save her. Save Emma from the life you're giving her. Dragged to daycares, raised by strangers, a mother who's never home. She needs stability. She needs family. She needs me. She needs her mother. And I'm right here." "For how long? Until the next business trip? The next promotion? You're just like your own mother, Sarah. Career-obsessed, selfish. I won't let you do to Emma what was done to you." The comparison hit like a slap. My mother had been a surgeon, brilliant and dedicated and often absent. I'd spent my childhood with nannies and after-school programs, and yes, sometimes I'd resented it. But she'd also shown me that women could be ambitious and successful. That motherhood didn't mean sacrificing everything else. My mother was a good mom. And so am I. We'll let the courts decide that. The sirens were getting closer. I could hear Emma starting to cry from the other room, woken by the noise. Every instinct screamed to run to her, but I stayed in the doorway, blocking Carol and Betty from leaving. "Ma'am, officers are at your location," the operator said. I heard the knock at the front door, heard it open, heard the heavy footsteps of police officers entering my home. "Back here," I called out. 2 uniformed officers appeared in the hallway, hands on their belts, assessing the situation quickly. I'd never been so relieved to see strangers in my life. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. This is my house. These 2 women were going through my belongings without permission. I have video evidence of theft and of a false police report being filed against me." The older officer, a woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked at Carol and Betty. "Ma'am, is this true? Are you the homeowner here?" "I'm her mother-in-law," Carol said, drawing herself up. "I'm here because someone needs to protect that child." "From her own mother?" The officer's tone was skeptical. "Do you have permission to be in this residence?" "I was babysitting. I have every right." "The babysitting arrangement ended the moment I arrived home," I interrupted. "I asked them to leave. They refused. They were going through my jewelry and discussing a custody filing based on false allegations of abuse." The second officer, younger with a notebook already out, looked at the bed where the jewelry was still laid out in 2 piles. "Is this your jewelry, ma'am?" "Yes, all of it, including the pieces they were in the process of taking." "We weren't taking anything." Betty spoke up for the first time, her voice shrill. "We were documenting. For the court." Evidence of excessive spending, of materialism, of priorities that don't include that child. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back," the older officer said firmly. "Both of you, please move away from the bed and keep your hands visible." Emma's crying was getting louder. I couldn't stand it anymore. "Officers, my daughter is in the other room. I need to get to her." The younger officer nodded. "Go ahead, we'll handle this." I ran to Emma's room and found her standing in her crib, face red and blotchy from crying, arms reaching for me. The bruise around her eye was worse than it had looked on video, purple and swollen. There was another mark on her arm, 4 small ovals in a line. Fingerprints. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises. I lifted her out of the crib and held her close, feeling her little body shake with sobs. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. You're safe now." She buried her face in my neck, her hands fisting in my shirt. I carried her back to the bedroom doorway where I could see what was happening but keep some distance. The officers were separating Carol and Betty, taking statements. The older officer caught my eye and gestured me over. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Officer Hernandez. This is Officer Park. We're going to need a full statement from you. But first, can you tell me about those bruises on your daughter?" "They happened while she was in my mother-in-law's care. I have video evidence showing my daughter being handled roughly this morning. I also have messages showing my mother-in-law being evasive when I asked about the injury last night. Has your daughter been seen by a doctor?" "Not yet. I just got home. I'd recommend taking her to the emergency room. They can document the injuries and do a full exam. That documentation will be important if there are legal proceedings." Legal proceedings. Custody battle. The words I'd overheard were becoming reality. Officers, you need to understand, Carol interrupted, her voice desperate now. This is all a misunderstanding. I love my granddaughter. I would never hurt her. The bruise was an accident, and I was just trying to help. Ma'am, please stop talking. Officer Hernandez's voice was firm. Anything you say can and will be used in court. Court? I'm the victim here. I'm trying to protect a child from a neglectful mother, and you're treating me like a criminal. You filed a false police report, I said quietly. You broke into my house. You were stealing my property. And you hurt my daughter. Those aren't the actions of a concerned grandmother. Those are crimes. Officer Park was on his radio, calling for additional units. Officer Hernandez turned to me. Mrs. Mitchell, do you want to press charges? Did I? This was my husband's mother, Emma's grandmother. But she'd hurt my baby. She'd planned to take her away from me. She'd invaded my home, my privacy, my life. Yes, I want to press charges for everything. The false report, the theft, the assault on my daughter. Everything. Carol's face crumpled. Sarah, please, don't do this. Think about Jake. Think about your marriage. I made a mistake. I can see that now. But we're family. Family doesn't do this. More officers arrived. Carol and Betty were separated, read their rights, and escorted out in handcuffs. Betty maintained her icy silence, but Carol was sobbing, pleading, making promises she should have made months ago. I didn't watch them leave. I was too busy holding Emma, checking her over, trying to understand the full extent of what had happened while I was gone. Officer Hernandez stayed behind to take my full statement and collect evidence. I showed her the nanny cam footage, the messages from Carol, the timeline of events. She photographed the jewelry on the bed, the contents of my drawers, everything that had been disturbed. This is pretty clear-cut, she said, after an hour of documentation. Breaking and entering, attempted theft, filing a false report, and depending on what the medical exam shows, possibly child endangerment or assault. Your mother-in-law is looking at serious charges. Good. She studied me for a moment. You're very calm about this. I'm not calm. I'm furious. But fury doesn't help my daughter right now. Getting her checked out, making sure she's safe, documenting everything for the inevitable custody battle that helps. Smart. Do you have a lawyer? Not yet, but I will by tomorrow. Good. You're going to need one. And Mrs. Mitchell? Make sure you keep copies of everything. Every video, every message, every piece of documentation. People like your mother-in-law don't give up easily. She was right. When Jake finally called me back 3 hours later, after I'd spent 2 hours in the emergency room getting Emma examined and photographed and tested, after I'd spoken to a pediatrician who documented defensive wounds on my daughter's arms, after I'd filed a restraining order and hired a lawyer who specialized in family law, his first words weren't, "Is Emma okay?" or "What happened?" His first words were, "How could you do this to my mother?" I was so tired, so emotionally drained, but I'd been preparing for this conversation since the moment I saw those handcuffs click around Carol's wrists. Jake, your mother broke into our house. She was stealing from us. She filed for emergency custody of our daughter based on false abuse allegations. She hurt Emma badly enough to leave bruises. How could I not press charges? She was trying to help. She loves Emma. She grabbed our 2-year-old daughter hard enough to leave finger-shaped bruises on her arm. She shook her. She pushed her. The doctor classified it as assault. Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Jake? I'm here. His voice was different now. Smaller. Finger-shaped bruises? 4 of them. On her left arm. The doctor took photos. There's also evidence of rough handling around her shoulders and back. Emma has been terrified since I got home, Jake. She flinches when I touch her too quickly. Your mother did that. Mom said it was an accident, said Emma Fell. I have video showing otherwise. Another long silence. Can I see it? I sent him the relevant clips, watched the 3 dots appear and disappear as he processed what he was seeing, waited. Oh my God. Yeah. Sarah, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was planning any of this. She filed for custody, Jake. She had a lawyer. She had a plan. She had a friend helping her document evidence of my unfitness as a mother. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. This was premeditated. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Is Emma okay? Physically, she'll heal. Emotionally, we'll need to wait and see. She's got an appointment with a child psychologist on Monday. I'll be there. I'll take time off work, whatever she needs. Good, because Jake, I need you to understand something. Your mother isn't allowed near our daughter anymore. Not supervised, not unsupervised, not at family events, not ever. If you can't support that, then we have a bigger problem than your mother. I support it. Completely. Sarah, I'm coming home. I'm leaving work right now. We're at Lisa's house. I didn't want to stay at home tonight. I'll come there. Just, please don't make any decisions about us until I get there. Let me show you that I'm on your side. Let me prove it. I wasn't sure he could. Wasn't sure I wanted him to, but for Emma's sake, I was willing to see. The trial took 4 months to arrive. In that time, a lot happened. Jake moved out temporarily, not because I asked him to, but because he said he needed space to process what his mother had done, what it meant about his childhood, about the woman who'd raised him. He went to therapy. We went to couples therapy. Emma went to play therapy with a specialist in childhood trauma. Carol hired an expensive lawyer and pleaded not guilty to all charges. She claimed self-defense, claimed she was protecting her granddaughter from a dangerous situation, claimed the videos were taken out of context. Betty, her accomplice, took a plea deal early, probation and community service in exchange for testifying against Carol. It turned out Betty was Carol's lawyer's paralegal, someone who'd helped her research grandparent rights and custody law, someone who'd encouraged her worst impulses. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Amanda Chen, who'd seen enough custody battles to recognize a manipulation campaign when she saw one. She built the case methodically. The nanny cam footage, the medical evidence, text messages between Carol and Betty that dated back 3 months, showing the planning stages. Carol's search history full of phrases like, prove mother unfit and grandparent custody rights. Most damning of all were Carol's own journals, seized from her house with a warrant. Pages and pages of obsessive notes about my parenting, my work schedule, my choices, dates and times I'd been late picking Emma up from daycare. Observations about Emma's clothing, her behavior, her development. Comparisons to Jake as a child, raised by a stay-at-home mother who devoted every waking moment to him. Sarah is destroying that child the same way her own mother destroyed her, Carol had written. I won't allow it. Emma deserves better. She deserves me. Reading those words in the courtroom, hearing them spoken aloud by the prosecutor, I finally understood. This wasn't really about Emma at all. It was about Carol's need to be needed, her identity as a mother, her inability to accept that her son had a life separate from her. And it was about her hatred of me, of everything I represented, the career woman who'd taken her son away, the ambitious mother who didn't conform to her standards, the daughter-in-law who'd never deferred to her wisdom. Emma didn't have to testify, she was too young, and the evidence was strong enough without putting her through that. But her therapist did, explaining the behavioral changes she'd seen, the nightmares, the separation anxiety, the regression in potty training and language development. Jake testified too, and that was harder to watch than anything else. My husband, pale and shaking, telling the court about his childhood, about his mother's controlling behavior, about the time she'd tried to convince him not to marry me because I was too ambitious, about how he'd excused and minimized and enabled her for years because she was his mother and he loved her. But I should have protected my wife and daughter, he said, his voice breaking. I should have seen what she was capable of. I'm sorry I didn't. The verdict came back faster than expected. Guilty on all counts: breaking and entering, attempted theft, filing a false police report, assault on a minor, and conspiracy. The judge, an older woman who reminded me of Officer Hernandez, didn't mince words during sentencing. Mrs. Lawrence, you violated every trust that exists between a grandmother and her grandchildren. You hurt a defenseless child to serve your own purposes. You attempted to weaponize the legal system against a good mother doing her best. The court finds your actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum penalty. 18 months in county jail. 3 years probation after release. Mandatory counseling. restitution for medical bills, legal fees, and therapy costs, and a permanent restraining order preventing any contact with Emma or me. Carol stood there in her expensive suit, her perfectly styled hair, her practiced expression of wounded dignity, and for the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. It was over. 6 months after the trial, Jake and I separated. Not divorced, we both wanted to try to save the marriage, but living apart while we figured out if we could rebuild trust, if he could establish boundaries with his family, if I could forgive him for not seeing his mother's toxicity earlier. Emma was thriving. The nightmares had stopped. She was back to her cheerful, curious self, hitting all her developmental milestones, making friends at her new preschool. She didn't ask about her grandmother. When she saw Jake for their scheduled custody time, she was happy and relaxed, no longer afraid. I got the promotion. The client we'd pitched in San Francisco signed, and the partners made me senior director of the marketing department. My mother would have been proud. I'm standing in my new apartment now, smaller than the house, but bright and safe and entirely mine. Emma is asleep in her room, surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books, and the kind of security that comes from knowing your mother will always, always protect you. There's a framed quote on my wall now, something I found during one of the darkest days of the trial. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is setting a boundary. I learned that lesson the hard way. I learned that family isn't an excuse for abuse, that love without respect is manipulation, that protecting my child means protecting her from anyone who would harm her, even if that person is supposed to love her. I learned that I am stronger than I ever knew. And I learned that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most important transformations. My phone buzzes. A text from Lisa. "How's my favorite boss? Drinks this weekend?" I smile and type back. "You're on." Emma stirs in her sleep, makes a soft sound, settles back down. I watch her for a moment, this perfect little person I would burn the world down to protect. I think about Carol in her cell, about Betty on probation, about Jake trying to rebuild himself in therapy. I think about the woman I was before that trip to San Francisco, the one who smiled through passive aggression and made excuses for inexcusable behavior. I don't recognize her anymore, and that's okay, because the woman I am now, she would walk through fire for her daughter. She would stand up to anyone, face down any threat, fight any battle. She would never, ever apologize for being both a mother and a person, for having ambitions and dreams, for showing her daughter that women can be anything they want to be. I am the owner of my life and my emotions. I choose my boundaries. I protect what matters. And what matters is sleeping peacefully in the next room, safe and loved and free from anyone who would use love as a weapon. That's worth everything.